Okay, today's the last day of Chanukah. So let's talk about Chanukah. Today's Eis Chanukah. And the Rebbe loves Eis Chanukah. It's one of the Rebbe's Yomim Tevim. I don't know if you know, by the Peilish Chassidim, they say that until Eis Chanukah, you could say Ksiva v'chasima teva. I think that's like, there's a... No, I don't think that's true. But there's till the end of Chanukah, there Vinch Mizachona, Aksiva Chsimateva, a cousin, Misnagid, who sent his kids to Chassidish Cheder. So he told me I can put up with a lot of Chassidish shtick, but to have Aksiva Chsimateva Chanukah is a little difficult for me. Anyway, by the Peilish, till Chanukah is Nimshach Tishtei. It's Aksiva Chsimateva. It's the last day of Chanukah. Zeis Chanukah. The reason it's called Zeis Chanukah, Bepashtus, is because of the Kiryas HaTorah. The way the Kiryas HaTorah of Chanukah works is that on Chanukah we read the Pasha of the Nesiim. Right? What's the Pasha of the Nesiim? That when the Mishkan, which was the first and mobile house of Hashem, was erected, was constructed, so the Nesiim, the princes, the leaders said that they're going to wait for the Jewish people to give whatever they're going to give. And they figured there'll be a significant shortfall, there won't be enough. And they decided whatever is remaining from the debt to build the Beis HaMikdash, they'll divide 12 ways and each one will pay 1/12. And what happened was they underestimated Klal Yisrael. Yidden gave Daiva Hesed, it was more than enough, and they were left holding their checkbooks. But the Nishgedaft, every Jew gave what he needed to give and they didn't need the Nesiim. And the Nesiim of course felt terrible and they were also embarrassed. So the Eibusha made a nes that they were the ones to bring the Avnei Hashem and Avnei HaMiluyim. I don't know if you know this, that the stones that were in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol were brought by the Nesiim. And it's a pasuk in Parshas Vayakel. V'Nesiim heviu eis Avnei Hashem. So the word V'Hanesiim is missing Yuds. It's spelled Vav, Hey, Nun, Shin, Aleph, Mem. Nesiim usually would be with two Yuds. Vav, Hey, Nun, Shin, Yud, Aleph, Yud, Mem. And in Parshas Pekudei, Parshas Vayakel, the word Hanesiim is missing, is written with two Yuds missing. So if I'm not mistaken, Rashi says the reason, because since they were, so to speak, underestimated Klal Yisrael, and they lost the opportunity to participate in the building of the Beis HaMikdash, so to speak, they're mentioned with a deficiency. They're mentioned missing two Yuds. But another explanation for why the word Hanesiim is missing Chasa Yudim, because the word Nasi without Yuds means the clouds or wind. Because how did they have the stones? Because it came to them in their portion of the mun. Every Jew got every day a shtickle mun, a portion of mun. And by Tzadikim it says it came to the Pesach Beis, some didn't have to go anywhere to get it, they just opened up their door and it was waiting for them. So one morning the Nesiim walked out of their tents and there was the stone that was destined to be used for their own tribe. So Nesiim means the clouds brought it to the Nesiim, so the Nesiim could bring it. The bottom line is that because the Nesiim underestimated the love of Yidden for the Eibishter and for the Eibishter's Beis HaMikdash, they ended up without an opportunity to participate in the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So they had to make up for it. So they decided that they're going to be Mechanech the Beis HaMikdash. That they're going to do the Chanukah. They're going to be Mechanech the Beis HaMikdash. They're going to bring Karbanis, and each one is the beginning of Nisan. As soon as the Mishkan is up and ready to roll and in function. So even though they didn't participate in the building of the Beis HaMikdash, they'll create the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash. And of course a lot of interesting things that happened. The Eibusha said that every day a different Nasi should bring, which meant that on the seventh day, which was yesterday's Kiryas HaTorah, Menashe brought on Shabbos, because the Chedesh Nisan that year was Sunday, Rishon Limei Bereishis, L'maaseh Bereishis. So it was the seventh day of Nisan was Shabbos, which was the Kiryas HaTorah of the seventh day of Chanukah, yesterday's Kiryas HaTorah. And they brought it also on Shabbos. They also brought Keteiras B'chutz. They brought incense on the outside Beis HaMikdash, outside Mizbeach. The only time that Keteiras was brought on the outside Beis HaMikdash. And it was not an Aveda because there was no Eish Zora. I'm not going to go into it at this particular juncture. The details are not important. What is important was they were Machanech the Beis HaMikdash. They inaugurated, they initiated the Beis HaMikdash. And of course, the way the Maimonic Chassidus explain what's the concept of chinuch. You have in Chassidus, Maimorim, the middle rebbe has a sefer called Sha'arei Tshuva. And then Sha'arei Tshuva has a whole section that's called chinuch. I've never learned it, but I know that it exists. What is the process of chinuch al pi Torah? Chinuch is like with a little child. When you start a new process, when you start a new step, when you start a new stage in life, you make a very, very big deal out of it. The Maimorim bring down, for example, when you send the child to school on the first day. So there's a very big ceremony how his parents take him to school or bring him to the bus and then sit in the classroom with him, and they give him prizes and they make such a very big deal and they celebrate the child's courage. And it is very courageous for a little child who spent all of his or her life at home with his mother or her mother now to go off and be in a strange environment with other children and with a strange teacher and so forth. They make a very, very big deal. And the child goes to school, it's a big deal. You prepare them weeks in advance, you're going to go to school, and they try to seem so positive even though the child is frightened. And then when the child comes home on that first day, you make the feast of feasts. The child went to school. And then what happens? A few days pass, the child gets used to life in school, and people forget about it. People forget about it. And to be sure, when the child goes to school on that first day, he doesn't learn very much. He only learns the experience of being in school. I mean, the learning takes place afterwards. But this is the Seder of Chinuch. This is what the Eibusha set up his world, that when you have a moment or a circumstance of initiation, of beginning, of Chanukah, Banayin, Upfrischen, to renew something, the very beginning is a very big celebration. And then once it's established, then things fall into place, everything is normal, and you make less of a big deal out of it. And this is true in every aspect of the Eibusha's creation, including the Beis Hamikdash. Beis Hamikdash was built. The first thing that was done was a big Chanukah, a big celebration with extra karbonis and so forth and so on. Once the Beis Hamikdash was built, once the Beis Hamikdash was established, so it's no longer a big deal. It's done. And of course, Chassidus talks about how you should view this process of chinuch. How should you view this initial event of making a very big tzimis out of something when it begins? And it's very similar to the theme of the Chasana Maimed that we learned a couple of weeks ago. What happens when a person gets married? You make a very big deal. And then a person gets married and God is nothing. A young man hat mir gesagt. And when I was a chassan, hat das nicht gesagt. But a chassan in the week of Sheva Brachas is like an esrik. You look at it, you touch it, you hold it, and then it's so beautiful. And after that week, he goes in the garbage. The initial week, the initial period of Chanukah is a very, very big celebration. So the Maimorim explain the following: that when you start something, the first step in developing it properly is to create a kesher, to create a connection. A child goes to school, so the child has to develop a connection with the concept of school and with the idea of learning. The connection is called, in Chassidus, it's called Yesod, his kashas, connection. There has to be a connection between a parent and a child, between a teacher and a student, between a husband and a wife and a husband, and so forth. The first step is to create this connection. This connection is not the relationship. It's before the relationship. It sets the stage for the relationship. For there to be a relationship tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, next decade, you have to have an initial event, an initial point of glue, of cohesion or adhesion to create a connection which allows that later on there should be a relationship. A teacher teaches, but before a teacher can teach, there has to be a chemistry between the teacher and the student. A parent's parents, right, which is parents, right? Parents are not their children's friends. They're their parents' models, or they're they're their children's role models, or their children's educators. And part of rearing children is being able to know when you have to do those things that the child considers mean and undesirable, because that's what parenting means. Parenting means leading, not being led, not being nice necessarily. You have to be nice, but not giving the child whatever the child wants. The child shouldn't be frustrated and upset. Child rearing is one of the most difficult jobs in the world, right? The only job more difficult than raising children is what? This is what I tell the girls in Machon. The only job more difficult than raising children is being married. And these are the two jobs that you can't go to school for. Finished. They don't teach it. The only place you could learn it is in your own home. In other words, where you grew up. And you hope you have a good model. And this is God in Chaycha. But in any case, this is how it works. So for parents to rear their children, there has to be a human relationship. There has to be love, there has to be connection. And in that framework, the parents his or her child. And the same is true in education, the same is true in ish v'isha, a husband and a wife. In every relationship, there is first a chitzonius and then a pnimius. And in Inside Chassidus, they talk about this. The chemistry, the first step of the connection, which takes place before the relationship actually is in function, this is called chinuch. Lamoshcha. To be mechanech, to set the stage, to create the possibility. And just like when a little child goes to school, the first time the child goes to school, you make such a very big deal out of it. Although the child is not yet learning. The learning is going to start later. But you make a very big deal out of the event of going to school, because before the child can learn, they have to have a connection to a school. The same is true in the Beis HaMikdash. When the Beis HaMikdash was built, the first day or the first days, they brought many, many extra karbanos, and there was a lot of joy and a lot of celebration and a lot of participation of people who later on would go home and live their lives to create the connection between Yidden and the Eibush and the Beis HaMikdash. Once the connection is created, then it goes into a normal cycle, to a normal pattern of regular karbanos, and it's not as exciting and as dynamic, and it's not extraordinary. It's ordinary. It's tadid. It's tamid, as opposed to Einei Tadid and Musaf. It's the ordinary life that transpires in the Beis HaMikdash each day. And this is Chanukah. Chanukah was a circumstance where they made a renewal in the Beis HaMikdash. And the beginning of that renewal was a big shturim. Right? So they had the Chanukah in the Mishkan. You had the Chanukah in the first Beis HaMikdash. You had the Chanukah when they built the second Beis HaMikdash. And you had Chanukah after the second Beis HaMikdash had been desecrated and been repurified. There was another Chanukah. This is the Chanukah that we celebrate. And we talked about the other day, last week, why the Yom Tov is Dafke Chanukah. Why don't we make the Yom Tov out of the fact that the Mishkan was built, or the first Beis HaMikdash, or second Beis HaMikdash, which took place in Chodesh Cheshvan? Why do we make the big deal out of Chanukah, Dafke, which is the fourth circumstance, the fourth possibility of being Mechanech, the house of the Eibishter? Because this Chanukah came directly from Yidden. It didn't come from the Eibishter's inspiration. This came from Yiddish Mesiras Nefesh. And the Eibishter participated in the Chanukah. How? He gave them a Shemen Zayizach. I'm sure you've heard these Teiras many times before. Al Pi Din Teira, they did not need pure oil. Al Pi Halacha, Al Pi Nigla the Teira, they did not need pure oil, because everybody was Tameh. And the din is that a Yachid, an individual, is sent out of the Beis HaMikdash when he's Tameh, but when the whole community is Tameh, or even if the majority is, the community is Tameh, or the Kayanim are Tameh, or the Kalim are Tameh, so you're Makir of Karbanas Betumah. You bring the Karbanas in a state of spiritual uncleanness. So they could have been lighted Shemen Tameh oil, which was not pure, impure oil in the Beis HaMikdash, there would have been no crime. And the Eibishter made the Nes, not because without this Nes they couldn't light the Meneda, but because without this Nes, there wouldn't have been the element of Chanukah, of renewal. Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh. And what were they Mesiras Nefesh for? They were Mesiras Nefesh for Lashkichem Teresecha, Lavidem Echokir Etzenecha. Like the Rebbe says in all the Maimarim, all the Sichos, that the Greeks had no problems with Yiddishkeit. Yiddishkeit is a beautiful culture. It's a very, very interesting way of life. But the idea that it doesn't change, that it always remains the same, that it's stagnant, that it's not evolving, because it comes from a living God, and just like He is eternal, His wisdom is eternal, and His nation is eternal, and His land that He's given to His nation is also eternal. This is what the Greeks had a problem with. What do you mean? It's culture. Culture evolves. People change, societies change, priorities change, civilizations change. The same ritual, no change whatsoever. They couldn't tolerate that. But it's a beautiful culture, Tak. And of course their issue was they wanted to take God out of Yiddishkeit. It's a beautiful idea to light candles. Candles are very beautiful, right? But the idea that it's Teirasecha and Chukecha, that it's the laws of the Eibush, that it's the Teira of the Eibush, that it has to do with serving Hashem, has to do with a connection to Atmos Baruch Hu, that's a transcendent, that's a higher than reason component, a higher than reason idea. This, the Greeks had a problem with. So Yidden will make a nefesh for the tahara, for the precious, for the purity, and for the removal of Yiddishkeit from the material world. So the Eibishter honored their Mesiras Nefesh for tahara by giving them pure oil, although technically they didn't need pure oil. They could have used ordinary oil. Impure oil would have been more than adequate for those 8 days until they were able to get pure oil. But Yidden will make a nefesh for tahara, so the Eibishter provided them with oil that was pure. And in Chassidus it's brought Nacha Kvetch. And the Lashon Gemara is that there was Pach Echad Shemen, which was Munach B'chei Sameh Shel Kein Gadol. It was one jug of oil that was laying with the seal of the high priest. This is a detail which we all know about, and we ain't ish samalev. Since when does the oil of the Menorah have to have the approval of the Kein Gadol? There was a special factory, there was a special chamber in the Beis Hamikdash called Lishkas Hashmanim, where they prepared oil for the Menorah and for the Menachos, and there were a group of Kohanim, and there was a whole office with an executive secretary and an assistant and so forth, who were in charge of preparing the oil. The Kohen Gadol was not directly involved. So what's the pshat? Pach Echad Shemen Munach B'chei Sameh Shel Kein Gadol. So there's different pshatim. What Chassidus says is that this was the whole chiddush, that they didn't find a pure jug. They found Pach Echad, a singular jug, a jug that represents Echad. There is no other jug like it, because it's Munach B'chei Sameh Shel Kein Gadol, has the seal of the high priest. The high priest is called Yechida of Nefesh, right? The Kodesh HaKadoshim is Yechida of Machon. Yom Kippur is Yechida of Zman. And the Kohen Gadol is Yechida of Nefesh. He represents the very essence of the Jewish soul. And the idea that this jug had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, not all the jugs had the seal of the Kohen Gadol. This jug had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, because it represented the Yechida L'Yachtoch, the Yechida the Pinta L'Yid, for which Yidin were Mesa Nefesh, and the Eibishter arranged B'nes Goloi, that they should find that one jug, and there should be not enough for it to burn 8 days. There should be only enough to burn 1 day, and the Eibishter made a nest, and it burned 8 days, and that's why we have 8 days of Halav Eidah. So this was the Eibishter's chinuch. The Eibishter was machanech, the Beis Hamikdash, but the story of Chanukah with this jug of oil. And therefore, now that I digressed, on Chanukah we read from Pashas Nosei the Nesiim's Karbonis, because this was the first event of chinuch. You understand? By the story of Chanukah, it was the fourth event of chinuch in the Beis Hamikdash. But we read from the Torah how the Beis Hamikdash was inaugurated, how the Beis Hamikdash was conditioned, was initiated the first time around through the Nesiim. So on the first day of Chanukah we read the first carbon, the second day we read the second carbon, the third day you read the third carbon, the fourth day you read the fourth carbon. And it's not so simple, because the first day you read Taka the first and the second, I believe. And the second day you read the second and the third. And the third day you read the third and the fourth. And the fourth day you read the fourth and the fifth. And the fifth day you read the fifth and the sixth. And the sixth day you read the sixth and the seventh. And the seventh you read the seventh and the eighth. And on the eighth day you read the eighth and the ninth and the 10th and the 11th and the 12th. And then it says, Zeis Chanukah Samizbeach. This is the Sach HaKol, this is the sum total of all the Karbanas that all the Nesiim brought. And you go into Aharon HaKoyin. Aharon HaKoyin lit the Menorah, right? And Kain Asas HaMenorah. That's how today's Kiyas HaTorah finishes. It's quite long. So, Zeis Chanukah is different than the other 7 days, because each day of Chanukah we read a section of how Klal Yisrael was Machanech. They inaugurated, they initiated, they opened up, they prepared the Beis Hamikdash. But after it was all done, the Torah tells us a sach hakel, a total. There were this many plates and these many spoons and this many cups and this many animals and this much incense and so forth and so on. A sach hakel. If 12 Nesiim and each one brought a pod and an ayil and so many sheep and so many goats and so many rams and so many oxen, the sach hakel, the total of all of them together, was kach v'kach, was so much and so much. This is what we do on Zeis Chanukah. It's a total, it's a summary. You understand? Now, in Gemara, you would have, the question, Minyan Alamali, why do you have to, we can all count. The Torah mentions the Karbanos of the 12 Nesiim, and then the Torah says, if you add up the gifts of all 12 Nesiim, it adds up to this Sach Hakel. Why, we can all count, why does the Torah have to enumerate it? This is in Rambam, it's very typical. Whenever the Rambam does something that involves details, after he finishes, he summarizes. He says the number of details that I just listed was whatever it is, 207 or 70, and he'll go through them by numbers, 1, 2, 3. He'll go through all the ones that he listed before in his sefer to give you a sach hakel, a summary. Everything that Rambam does is he summarizes it with numbers and with short phrases that makes it easy to remember. But that's not the style of the Chumash. The Chumash doesn't do summaries. In this case, the Torah does a summary. The summary of all of the gifts that the Karbanos, that the Nesiim brought to initiate the Beis Hamikdash was so much as Zeis Chanukahs. This whole total of the Karbanos, of the gifts that were brought for the first 12 days of Nisan, this adds up to this so much and so much. This was the Chanukah of the Beis Hamikdash. And of course, what Chassidus explains is that the Torah gives us a sach hakel, the Torah gives us a summary, not because we don't know how to count. You don't need much of a calculator to figure these numbers out. They're not very, very huge numbers. The Torah gives us a sach hakel to give us a summary for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons is because the sach hakel, the summary, the total, is more than the collection of its parts. In other words, every day, every Nasi brought a gift. The first day was Yehuda, the second day was Yisachar, the third day was Zvulun, the fourth day was Reuven, the fifth day was Shimon, the sixth day was Gad, right? The seventh day was Menashe, and the eighth day was Ephraim today, and the ninth day is Binyamin. And then you have Dan was the 10th day, Asher was the 11th day, and Tal was the 12th day. Hello. So each one of the 12 Nesiim brought a gift. Zayis Chanukah, the Mizbeach says that after all 12 Nesiim brought their gifts, now you have a sach hakel, it's been completed. And when each one brings his or her gifts, and the gifts are completed, the total, the sach hakel, is more than the parts which contributed to the total. Even though, in other words, even though mathematically, when you read the Chumash gives us the amount of matanis that all 12 Nesiim brought, and the mathematik stimmt, the mathematics, it fits, it's 12 times what each one gave, okay? But the idea of Zeis Chanukah is that it's a sum total that has more than the individual parts. In other words, one Shevet gives a carbon is one thing, a second Shevet gives a carbon is a second thing. All 12 Shvatim together give a carbon, it's more than 12 Shvatim giving a carbon. It's like a 13th idea. It's something which is above all of the 12. That's the content of a sach hakel. The Torah finishes all the karbanos, says this is the end. Or to say it in simple words, the last day of Chanukah is not the last day of Chanukah. The last day of Chanukah encompasses the whole Chanukah. All 8 days of Chanukah are found in the last day. Zeis Chanukah today completes all of the inyanim of Chanukah. Everything that you're supposed to do on Chanukah is culminated in today. Or to use a typical rebbe form, whatever we didn't do on Chanukah that we should have done. And of course, the number one theme of Chanukah that the Rebbe always focuses on is the idea of Ma'il in Ba'kedesh. You have to ascend in holiness, you have to grow, and you have to add, and you have to increase, so on and so forth. Comes the last day of Chanukah. Today is the sach hakel. It's the last day, and there's an opportunity to complete and to perfect whatever aspects of Chanukah were not 100% as they were supposed to be. So this is the theme, this is the concept, this is the inyan, this is the message of Zeis Chanukah.